Doctors of Reddit. What was your how the fuck did you survive that moment? Second year during my neurosurgery residency. Woman got shot execution style, kneeled down on both knees, shot in the back of the head, think Boondock Saints style, by her husband, who then shot himself. In the ER the patient was barely breathing and had a hemoglobin of 5.0. There was so much scatter from the metal artifact on the CT of her head that we didn't know what we were getting into, but we brought her emergently to the OR to do an exploratory craniectomy. We made incision and took off a flap of this thick, mangled skull where she was shot in the back of her head. Her shards of skull tore a massive hole in her superior sagittal sinus, big brain vein, that we had to repair. We found some small fragments of bullet but no big slug. When I went back to repair the portion of skull we cut out to access her brain, I found the bullet embedded in her skull. As we get older, our skull thickens, but this girl was young. She had an abnormally thick portion of her skull in the area where she was shot. After the case was over I looked back at her CT and it was a miraculous abnormality. The patient ended up surviving with no neurological deficits. She is a completely normal and high-functioning individual in society at this time. This strange thickened portion of her skull saved her life. If she would have been shot anywhere else in her head at point blank, she would have undoubtedly lost her life. I'm not one for fate or higher power, but this story always gives me goosebumps. Intern year doing surgery, guy gets brought in for a gunshot wound to the head. He was working at a jeweler that got robbed, his co-worker was black-bagged at the scene. He gets brought into the trauma bay and it's pretty hectic because GSW to the head and well he's alive. Not only is he alive, he's following commands but not speaking, probably from the shock. Cops are giving us reports saying he was likely shot with a .357 snub nose they recovered at the scene. So we do our primary and secondary survey and all this guy has is a single wood wound to his left frontal scalp where the bullet went in. So the team hasn't really seen something like this before. Sure, a GSW to the head wasn't new, but this guy was otherwise completely fine. The decision was made to get a quick frontal and late head X-ray to verify where the bullet was before proceeding to CT. Well, we don't see any bullet on the films. There's no bullet on the board or bed or within the patient's clothes. The man was shot in the head and the bullet bounced off his skull. CT showed no fracture even. It was wild, never seen anything like that since. So a common question I'm getting is how do we know it was a GSW? He had gunpowder burns on his forehead around the wound. An elderly lady had a massive brain hemorrhage, was transferred to terminal care to the health center inpatient ward I was working at as the doctor. Her prognosis was that she would die at any moment. There was no treatment, she was comatose, but breathing spontaneously through a tracheotomy tube. A week passed, with no medications, no food, no fluids, still alive. Then she began to stir, came conscious. Delirious, but conscious. So we started IV fluids, appropriate medications, and eventually physiotherapy. After a few months she moved into the local nursing home, lived for a few years. She had profound dementia, but was able to move. I wonder if the air moisturizing device in the room, because of the tracheotomy, kept her hydrated, because a healthy person would generally not survive a week without fluids. Emergency physician, I had a patient that was shot 9 times, 3 bullets to the head. He didn't call an ambulance, he brought himself to the emergency department. And by that I mean he drove himself to the emergency department. The 3 bullets in his head somehow didn't enter the cranium, so his brain was just fine. One of them entered his cheek and went underneath the skin to swing all the way around to the back of his head. He was discharged the same day. Paramedic here. Dispatched to a person who fell. Another update said unconscious. Last update about a minute or 2 before we got there was unconscious, not breathing, CPR in progress. Lady in her 40s is dead. Like for real. She's cold, has rigor mortis, pupils are fixed and dilated, monitor shows a systole. Not only is she dead, she's been dead for a while. Fire department is doing CPR, but it seems futile at this point. I call the hospital to talk to a doctor. Hey, can we get orders to terminate resuscitation efforts on this patient? I ask the physician on the other end. Nah, she seems kind of young, and I know it's probably futile, but go ahead and keep working and bring her on, was his reply. That's cool, no problem, we will keep going. We get the fourth, I intubate her, give her some epinephrine, put the thumper on her, give some Morapep, some bicarb, and holy shit, she has a pulse now. A week later she gets discharged from the hospital to rehab with only mild cognitive impairment. Basically, she had to learn to use a spoon and fork again, and she lost a week or two of her memory. And that's the short story of how I tried to kill a lady but wound up getting an award for it.